Back to business then. Matthew was with us earlier talking about the presidential debate, and we heard in that debate Mitt Romney being critical of the way Europe is trying to get its finances back on track.
Yes, now Mitt Romney was arguing that you don't get your finances on track and balance your budget by putting up taxes. And that, of course, is exactly what's been happening here in Europe, in Spain, as Mitt Romney said, and also here in France as well. Well, it's also the policy that Portugal's been following. And yesterday they announced plans as well to put up taxes even more. Now, of course, Portugal's had a bailout of 78 million euros, but it's struggling to meet its deficit target of 5% for this year. Well, now, draconian new tax rises have been announced as protests over austerity increase.
Empty platforms in Lisbon as the strike by railway engineers enters its fourth day. There have been periodic walkouts by train workers all week in protest at the government's spending cuts. Portugal has been trying to reduce its budget deficit to meet the demands of its international lenders. A plan to raise social security contributions was scrapped after the country's largest protest since it received a bailout over a year ago. That left the government with no choice but to raise the money from new taxes. Among the measures announced, a 4% levy on incomes, in addition to widening the tax bands, a hike in property tax, and the introduction of a levy on financial transactions. Along with spending cuts deemed essential by the finance minister, the package adds up to 3% of the country's GDP.
We face a critical moment today. We must decide the path we will choose. The apparently easier options would lead to a vicious circle involving a loss of credibility, losing the tolerance of our international partners, difficulties in accessing financing, as well as social and political instability.
It's not an entirely hopeless picture for Portugal, though. It managed to do a debt swap deal on the markets on Wednesday, exchanging €3.76 billion worth of bonds for longer-term debt, seen as an indication of market confidence in the country's recovery. Confidence the government will need. Unions have called for a general strike on November 14th.
Well, there you go. That's Portugal for you. Spain, next door. They're selling off bonds today.
Yes, also selling off bonds. They're selling up to around €4 billion of bonds. We'll be watching that very closely when that happens later this morning to see what happens to borrowing costs there in Spain. We should also take a look at the markets. They've been a bit perkier of late. Those are the US markets as they closed on Wednesday, up in positive territory. And over in Asia, where some markets are still trading, the Chinese ones, I should tell you, are closed for a holiday today. Mostly up, the Nikkei up 1%, the Kospi slightly down in South Korea.
Oh, you're talking Greece now as well, aren't you?
Yes, now Greece, of course, another country in the Eurozone firing line. Now, its Prime Minister, while back home, they're still talking to this troika of international creditors. Antonis Samaras has decided to take a short break in Paris, and why not? Nice place to visit. He's actually coming here to visit the International Herald Tribune, which you were talking about earlier. Of course, it's the 125th birthday of that newspaper. He's also going to be making a speech titled Restoring European Competitiveness on the World Stage. Well, as we were saying, Greece is still looking to agree the cuts and spending it needs to agree on. And we can go to Athens to join our correspondent there, Natalie Savarikas. Good morning to you, Natalie. Good to see you. Now, can you tell us, first of all, how are things going there in those discussions with Greece's creditors?
Well, the finance ministry is very much locked in talks, continuing to be locked in talks with its international creditors. The finance minister yesterday, Yannis Tournaras, said that there is still a sufficiently big gap with the Troika, that is a team of inspectors from the EC, the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. But he was confident that they would be able to reach a compromise and overcome these obstacles by Monday's Eurozone finance ministers meeting. So negotiations still ongoing. We don't have much on the table yet.
Natalie, Matthew was just telling me there are figures out saying that Greece is one of the most expensive countries in Europe. Can that really be true?
Yes, yes, and interestingly, Antonis Samaras, the Prime Minister, will be talking about competitiveness, restoring competitiveness on the European stage. Yes, Greece ranks amongst Europe's most expensive countries. Now, when it comes to, let's say, the basics like milk, cheese, it is the most expensive one. When it comes to furniture and all that industry, it is definitely the most expensive, especially as this industry has been seriously battered by this financial crisis. PCs the most expensive, and interestingly, Greece is the largest exporter of extra virgin olive oil, and yet it is still the most expensive, more expensive, if you like, than countries that don't produce olive oil. So all this, the experts say, is really attributed to the fact that Greece obviously has high taxes, but not only that, to the idiosyncrasies, if you like, of the Greek market, and of course, the red tape that remains. And I'll just wrap up with this. Just a reminder, Greece has amongst Europe's lowest wages as well.
Well, Natalie Savarikas there in Athens. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. Well, now let's get some more of the day's company news. And the shares in Hewlett-Packard plunged 13% on Wednesday. That followed the company's announcement that earnings will fall by more than 10% next year. Chief Executive Meg Whitman is in the process of a major turnaround for the struggling company, but she says revenue may not grow again until 2015.
Nokia plans to sell its headquarters in Helsinki. The sale is part of cost-cutting plans and could raise up to 300 million euros. Nokia has announced 10,000 job cuts as it tries to save 1.6 billion euros, but the company says it's committed to keeping its headquarters in Finland.
And Orly Airport here in Paris plans to increase passenger numbers by a third. The city's southern hub is getting an injection of around 450 million euros. Plans include a new facility to handle larger planes as well as better links to the country's rail network.
Now, taxpayers have been left seething in one part of Italy.
Yes, they are seething because a group of tax collectors, 5 in total, have been pocketing some of the proceeds, 100 million euros to be precise, and spending it on things including private planes, parties and yachts. You could probably buy quite a few for 100 million euros. They're arrested in the northern city of Genoa. I'm sure they won't get much sympathy there.
Like your words there, Mamma Mia, perfect. That's the news from us. More news coming up very shortly with Claire. Do stay with us if you can.